Again, hello to everyone who has come back to our channel and is going to watch another video. Today's video is going to be on the curse of knowledge, which is the second type of cognitive bias we're going to be discussing in depth. So, what is the curse of knowledge? We're just going to get into it. The curse of knowledge is a cognitive bias that occurs when an individual communicating with other individuals unknowingly assumes or expects that others have the private background information necessary to understand what they're explaining. In other words, you have an idea in your head and you're trying to explain it to someone else, but because you have all this background knowledge that built up to the idea you have, you're explaining something that this person has no idea what you're saying because they don't share the same background information that you do. So that's very confusing. An example of this, the best example that we've probably all experienced at one point or another, is a teacher creating a lesson plan that explains a concept in a way that is very confusing to the student, but they think that it's easy because of their expertise on the subject. So, then when the student tries to explain to the teacher, "So I'm so sorry, I'm not understanding this," say, "How could you not understand? It's very simple." Well, because the student knows nothing. So now we need to talk about what can we confuse with this, because it's very easy to get these different cognitive biases confused because a lot of them are very similar to each other. So do not confuse this cognitive bias with attitude projection. Curse of knowledge and attitude projection are not the same thing. Attitude projection is a psychological tendency for individuals to attribute their own attitudes, beliefs, and experiences onto others. This can be confused with the curse of knowledge bias because they're both related to one person's unshared thoughts in relation to something they share with another person. The key difference here, though, is that with the curse of knowledge, someone is it's like attitude projection a little bit, but instead of attitude, it's like knowledge projection, let's call it. So with the curse of knowledge, one person is thinking that another person is sharing, is understanding what they're saying. So one person thinks that what they're explaining is easy to understand, what they're writing is easy to understand, what they're designing is easy to understand, when in reality it's not. But that's a separate issue. Attitude projection is a little bit different because it's more like when people think, it's not concrete information, it's more people will think about others' feelings. So engineers will think that their engineered technology will be well received by lay people. Or someone hires a DJ for a party because that person thinks that nobody likes live music, that people only like DJs. But that's more an issue of likes and dislikes, whereas curse of knowledge would be someone is explaining a concept and in their head they're doing it very well, whereas the person on the receiving end is not on the same page and not understanding that information. So again, just like before, we have to talk about what can we do to combat this and why is it important to combat this type of curse of knowledge? What is this? Why do we need to be wary of this in our everyday lives? So it's very important to combat this bias because it can lead to serious misunderstandings between people where one person is left feeling like they explained their thoughts well and got their ideas across accurately, and the other person is left feeling completely lost. So this type of disconnect is it can, of course, just like everything, can range from being something very trivial to something very grave, in which case it's not a good thing to have. Miscommunication is never good. So this is something to, keep in mind. So to combat this, we can create pilot tests and focus groups as a form of getting an initial understanding of how well the points explained came across to a target audience. In the event of creating a big project or something that's worthy of a pilot test in a focus group, when you have to test something that's very, very important. When it's something that's everyday, that's just an idea you want to explain to a friend, something like that, we can also use concrete language for everyone to understand. So let's say that, just like an OID project. When I explain to my friends who are not students at Penn, concepts from my OID class, the first question they ask me is, what is OID? So it's language like that to any Penn student would be so obvious and so clear. To people who are not in Penn and don't have that prior knowledge, they don't understand. So when I'm talking to them, that's a total miscommunication. So we need to assume that not everyone has the same knowledge and expertise as the person explaining the concepts. So thank you so much again for another fantastic episode, and I'll see you in our next and last episode, unfortunately.